I can tell you stories of working the night shift at Puna Sugar. I started my whole career after college at Puna Sugar. What would happen is on the night shift, you take a 20-minute lunch break, and all the crane operators, the push rake operators, they turn the lights off, the big lights on the cranes. And then you'd only see the cab light on, like a small 12-volt light, and they're eating their cow. And after the 20 minutes, okay, time to get going again. And they start up the engines, and then they turn on the big floodlights, right? The big ones and all that. The whole place lights up. There's owls everywhere. You never knew they were there, but they were sitting up on all the rigging, all the stuff, and dive bombing and going for the rats while we were eating our cocoa tin. They were up there doing the same thing.
That's great.
Oh, man.
John, I also want to ask you, tell us just a little bit about what you're doing in terms of your research and archives.
Well, we've been going through all of our archived material and cataloging what palapalas we have and ancient documents that are maybe signed by very important people, not just kings, but things like Alexander Cartwright. He is the inventor of modern baseball. Well, he was a partner with Samuel Damon and bought and sold a whole bunch of land where we got a bunch of signatures out there with Alexander Cartwright on it. And collectors, baseball type collectors, go nuts over getting stuff like that. So we've been scanning and trying to get the word out about these type of things that we've been cataloging. And along with that is maps. So we have manuscript maps. These are one of a kind. They're hand-drawn, hand-colored. I've been trying to scan some of the ones that I could at Hilo Fine Arts Center. Then once it's scanned, I can then reproduce them in different scales. Because some of these maps are like 8 feet wide by 12 feet long. They're huge. You can, paper the wall of your office with it. Well, that's what the plantation managers needed in order to see what was going on their plantation. They needed these big life-size maps. Well, I've got a good number of them scanned, and we've been making some sales of 50% and 75% scale maps, and people are ecstatic to have a beautiful hand-drawn map of where they live. So right there, you have my house is in the middle of Pepakea or Honolulu, and my house is right here on this map. And you can look at all the intakes, all the river diversions, all the springs, the Hawaiian place names. This is so important. Some of these old maps have place names on it that we never knew. They had every waterfall was named. If there was a big flat rock in the middle of the river, they named that rock. It's fascinating to see what the Hawaiians felt and knew about their land, their ahupua'as, that it has a story. There's names and there's meanings behind those names. Richard, you were telling me about why A'ama, the A'ama crab, and all the men who were stuck to the side of the walls of the river.
Yeah, and Alma crabs, you don't find them in fresh water.
Yeah, we need to know more about our land so that we can appreciate it.
I love that you are finding these old place names and such that we've lost track of. It's wonderful that it still exists out there and that you're keeping track of all those things. And these archives are part of what group now?
They were the C. Brewer and Company archives. And then when the plantation was going out of business, they were actually starting to throw out a lot of these records. And they had this dumpster pulled up in the back, and I basically had a heart attack when guys were throwing out all these old documents. And I called up Ed Olson and I said, Ed, they're throwing out the stuff at Papaiko. I need you to make an offer to buy the building and everything in it. And he did. He called up and said, stop what you're doing. I'm buying the building and everything in it. I then learned that very afternoon what dumpster diving is all about.
Oh.
So I went and climbed over the edge of that dumpster and I recovered quite a bit of stuff, and it's right in my vault now.
Good for you, though. Good for you. My goodness, you single-handedly saved a lot of Hawaiian history.
Stock certificates and pictures, maps.
It's so fascinating to see all the different things.
There's so many things, Richard, Leslie. I was showing Andrew Cox of Blue Planet Research yesterday. He was down in Ka'u. And we went up to the reservoir way above us, and there's these massive eucalyptus robustas. They were planted in the 19 teens. And he goes, wow, why did they plant all these? Well, you see them all over the coast. You see them all over the island. Big patches of eucalyptus. It was for fuel. And nowadays, we're in peak oil. Well, in 1920, they had peak firewood. They were running out of wood to burn in the mill. And they needed to find a fast-growing species of wood. And it was that Eucalyptus robusta. And sure enough, in the manager's reports from 1925, and I'm reading this thing about my Kaiva reservoir that was built in 1925 and 26, the paragraph right ahead of the reservoir paragraph said forestry. We have planted 186,000 trees this year, and while our earlier plantings are not ready for fuel purposes yet, they soon will be. There it was, written right in the manager's report, 1926. They planted those trees for fuel purposes.
That's so interesting.
That was a whole nother story about Iko and Thomas Spencer when he bought the plantation in Honolulu, is that he was cutting down ulu trees to burn in his Honolulu mill.
Wow.
And the Hawaiians wrote to the Minister of the Interior saying, Thomas Spencer is cutting down all these ulu trees and you must make him stop, because he had a lease with the government. Well, Thomas Spencer got wind of it, and he had a lease all right, but he also had a purchase option. And he said, stop complaining, otherwise I'm going to exercise my purchase option and cut every tree down that I see fit. Well, he did. He purchased all of Pueo, Crown land, from the commissioners of Crown land, because he had a document from King Kamehameha III and verified by the King Kamehameha IV that he had the option to purchase 2,800 acres of land for $2,500, and he did. So much for the ulu trees at Pueo. They all became firewood.
Oh my. Well, I just wanted to point out that John is just a wealth of information. So for most people, they know he's very well versed and all this stuff. But what he said today in one place will really make a huge difference. People really realize how valuable John's knowledge is. And not only that, he's a good guy.
Yep.
I remember when the plantation was going out of business, Leslie, Richard offered me a job that I would go work at Mauna Kea Banana or Hamakua Springs. And I gotta think about this one. And you know what? Out of 600 workers at Hilo Coast Mauna Kea Sugar, Brewer kept back 6 people out of all of them. And I was one of the 6. So me and Donald Michima and Louis Pacheco and Sam Namau and Larry Patao, we stayed back. We were the last of the Mohicans. I had to turn you down, Richard, but there were higher and better things I had to do to take care of 18,000 acres of land.
I wanted to ask you, what did you do for the company while it was still operating? What was your job?
My position was crop control superintendent. Basically, I made sure the cane was green when it was supposed to be green, and I made sure it was yellow when it was supposed to be yellow, and then scheduled the harvest after that and put the ripener on. Fertilization, herbicides, ripener, anything to do with crop control, that was under me. And I reported to the field superintendent, who then reported to the manager. All the crop dusters, that was under me as well. And guys like Al Carter and Bob Kroll, I knew these men as I much as knew my father. And that's a whole nother story about all these crop duster pilots. And it was just really neat working with these guys.
Who was the one-armed pilot?
That was Bob Kroll.
You know why? Because my brother Guy had a small banana farm, and they would fly. The young kids would wave at the pilot, and my brother told him, "Don't wave at him. He only get one arm."
You can make him crash the plane.
Yeah, I used to have all these crop duster guys, and each of them came out of World War II or whatever. And the way they flew their crop duster was the way they flew their vehicle in the war. Don LaValle, he was a B-29 bomber pilot. He took his turns wide to the right, and he would spin around and come like this. and Bob Kroll. Bob Kroll was a P-38 pilot. That's the one with the two engines, and then there's a bathtub in the middle where the pilots, he would take his turns high, and then he'd come straight back down. And then Al Carter was Korean War. He was a P-51 pilot. He would go straight up at the end of his run, flip his tail over, and come straight back down. Oh, Marco, you see these guys flying, and it scares the dickens out of you. But there were times when you had an accident. So the Plantation radio system, Manuel Pablito, John, Bob Kroll went down in Indian Tree Road. Drive over there and we go cut through the cane and go find where Bob Kroll is. I hope he's okay. We get in there, middle of the field. The crop duster's sitting straight up on the cane. Bob Kroll's sitting on the top wing, just looking at us. Yeah. I go, Bob, what happened? Just ran out of air. Came down too steep, didn't level off in time, just ran out of air. That's all.
Oh, man.
After the plantation shut down, I got a new title from Brewer, Director of Diversified Crop Development. Well, that sounded pretty neat. So I did all sorts of research on diversified crops, and I have my warehouse above me here in Hakalau, and it is filled with diversified crop files. I research everything: bananas, papayas, lilikoi, and we did plant lilikoi up by that single Norfolk pine. That was our passion fruit experiment field.
Wow.
But one of the things I came up with tea, drinking tea, Camellia sinensis. And here I am in Hakalau, and right out that door there, I have an acre of tea. And Eva Lee of Tea Hawaii comes every other week and harvests and packages tea. And if you went into the locavore store, you're going to see Johnny's Garden.
That's you?
Black. That's me.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
What it was, guys, the Hamakua Coast soils are very acidic and they're leached of all nutrients, really. When you were growing cane, you were basically growing cane on hydroponics. Whatever fertilizer I put onto that soil was what that crop needed to grow. And after that crop was gone, if you don't put fertilizer back in, I'm sorry, you're not growing stuff. It's very infertile. Hey, looks good, huh, Richard? Good looking soil.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It looks good. And if you traffic the Hilo Coast soil, it turns into modeling clay. It's a beautiful soil, very forgiving soil, meaning all these sweet potato guys learned this, is that you can destroy the soil by harvesting it in the middle of big rains and all that, and it turns into clay. But all you do is you get the moldboard plow and you turn the soil over, let them sit in the sun for about 2-3 weeks, and it dries up and the soil returns to its original form. Yep. And there you go. You can plant again.
I bet I can tell you something, John, that you don't know about harvesting cane. Okay. Here's what I learned from my uncle when I was a little girl. My uncle Lofty Cook. Oh. He told me that when they burn the cane, all the rats run out and they chop off their tails and they make them into malasadas. And I've been eating malasadas for years and years and years. Thank you, John. That was so interesting. I think we will probably ask you back to tell us more about some of these things in the future. We will be back in 2 weeks for sure with another episode of What Would Our Kupuna Do? Thank you for listening, and ahui ho.
Okay. See you, folks.
That was great. Thank you very much. John, that was great.